October 24th, 1944. The Vosges Mountains, eastern France. Cold rain fell through the fog-drenched pines. Mud swallowed boots. Radio static cracked through the damp air. In a small clearing, exhausted American soldiers dug shallow foxholes, their rifles slick with rain. They were part of the 141st Infantry Regiment, men of the 36th Division, Texans mostly. For days, they had been ordered forward to break through German lines. But now, they were cut off, surrounded by enemy forces deep in the forest. Outnumbered, outgunned, alone. They would become known as the Lost Battalion. And for 6 days they would hold their ground, refusing to surrender, while the world forgot where they were. To understand their ordeal, we must return to the summer of 1944. After the Allied landings in Normandy, another front opened, Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France, August 15th. The 36th Infantry Division, the Texas Division, landed on the Mediterranean coast, pushing north through Lyon toward the German border. By October, they faced the heavily fortified German line in the Vosges Mountains. Dense forests, steep ridges, narrow roads, terrain perfect for defense. The enemy was the 16th Volksgrenadier Division, reinforced by SS troops, veterans of the Eastern Front. They knew every ridge, every ravine, every hidden approach. On October 23, 1944, the 141st Regiment received an order: advance deeper into the mountains. Seize the high ground near Biffontaine. A simple command on paper. But the fog was thick. Maps were outdated. Communication lines were unreliable. And the Germans were waiting. Lieutenant Colonel William Tex Horn led the advance battalion, roughly 275 men. They pushed forward, unaware they were walking into a tightening noose. By dusk, their flanks were cut. By nightfall, German artillery surrounded them on all sides. The 141st had become lost, trapped 5 miles ahead of the main Allied line. October 24th. Dawn brought silence and then the first shells. Men scrambled for cover as mortars rained through the trees. Supplies ran low within hours. Rations were soaked and spoiled. Ammunition dwindled. Medics crawled through mud to tend to the wounded. Private John McCullum later recalled, "It was like being buried alive. You couldn't move without being seen. You couldn't speak without being heard." The radios crackled with static, then died completely. The battalion was now isolated. Word reached headquarters. The 1st Battalion, 141st Infantry, missing. At first, commanders believed it was a minor setback. Then came fragments of intercepted radio, cries for help, coordinates fading in the storm. Major General John E. Dahlquist, commander of the 36th Division, ordered immediate rescue attempts. 2 battalions were sent forward. They too were repelled by German fire. The forest became a death trap. German snipers haunted the ridgelines. Every path was mined, every clearing pre-sighted for artillery. By October 27th, nearly 1,000 men had already fallen trying to reach the lost battalion. Desperate, Dahlquist turned to an unlikely group, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Japanese-American soldiers. Men whose families were still held in internment camps back home. They had already fought heroically in Italy, and now they were asked to rescue the trapped Texans. Sound. Train whistle. Marching footsteps. Distant bugle. Major General Dahlquist's order was simple: breakthrough, no matter the cost. But those words would soon become prophetic. October 27th. Cold winds swept through the forest. The 442nd RCT 2nd and 3rd Battalions began their advance through the fog. Hill by hill, they climbed under relentless fire. Private George Sakato recalled, "We couldn't see 10 feet ahead, but we knew somewhere out there. Americans were dying, waiting for us. They fought through machine gun nests, mortar ambushes, and dense minefields. Every yard was paid for in blood." The men of the 442nd, Nice soldiers, shouted their battle cry, "Go for broke." They meant it. They would gamble everything to save the lost battalion. That night, the forest became a nightmare. Tracer fire cut through the fog like lightning. The smell of cordite and wet pine filled the air. One soldier wrote in his diary, "It was so dark you couldn't tell friend from foe, only by the flashes of their rifles." German resistance grew fierce. Artillery fell like rain. The wounded screamed for medics who could not reach them. By dawn, the 442nd had lost over 200 men, and still had miles to go. October 29, 1944. The situation was desperate. The lost battalion had been without food for 5 days. Many were wounded, frostbitten, and starving. They refused to surrender. They still held their position, firing when they could, hiding when they must. Above them, American C-47s tried to drop supplies, but most parachutes drifted into German hands. The radio messages grew faint, then stopped altogether. No one knew if they were still alive. As the 442nd prepared for one final assault, Major Gordon Singles gathered his men. He told them, "Those boys are Americans, just like us. We're going to bring them home." At dawn, the Nice soldiers charged uphill through the trees, bayonets fixed, grenades ready, screaming "Go for broke!" into the fog. German machine guns tore into their ranks. But they didn't stop. By nightfall, they had broken through the final German line. On October 30th, 1944, after 6 days of isolation, the lost battalion was found. Out of 275 men, barely 211 could still fight. Many were wounded, some were dying, but they were alive, and they had never surrendered. October 30th, 1944. The fog lifted just enough to reveal them, the first shadowy figures of the lost battalion. Exhausted, emaciated, their uniforms torn, faces hollow, eyes sunken with disbelief. Private Tony Ismail of the 141st later said, "At first, we thought it was a dream. Out of the mist came these soldiers, Japanese Americans, bleeding, dirty, crying. They didn't stop until they reached us." The rescuers embraced the survivors in silence. Some laughed weakly, others wept openly. After 6 days surrounded, the lost battalion was found. But the price had been unimaginable. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team had suffered catastrophic losses. Over 800 casualties in less than a week. Entire platoons were wiped out. In one company of 185 men, only 17 walked away uninjured. General Dahlquist, shaken by the losses, gathered the survivors of the 442nd for a debrief. When only a handful appeared before him, he asked where the rest were. The reply was simple and devastating. "They're either dead or in the hospital, sir." The forest floor of the Vosges was now silent, a graveyard of broken helmets, burned trees, and blood-soaked soil. To the men of the 442nd, it wasn't just another mission. It was proof. Proof that loyalty and patriotism could not be measured by race or by fear. While their families were still imprisoned behind barbed wire in the internment camps of America, these Nice soldiers, second-generation Japanese Americans, fought and died to save fellow Americans. Private George Sakato, who would later receive the Medal of Honor, said quietly, "We didn't go to prove we were brave. We went to prove we were American." By 1945, the war moved east. The 442nd returned to Italy to fight once more. The men of the lost battalion, those who survived, were sent home, but they carried the memories of the Vosges forever. In Texas, parades greeted the survivors. Yet for many, there was no celebration, only reflection. They had seen too much. Sergeant William Horn wrote in his journal, "We went up the mountain 275 strong. We came back with ghosts walking beside us." For decades, their story faded into obscurity. History books spoke of Normandy, Stalingrad, Midway, but rarely of the Vosges or of the men who refused to surrender there. The lost battalion was remembered by those who lived, but the rescuers, the Japanese-American 442nd, were long overlooked. Racism lingered. Recognition was slow. For years, their medals lay gathering dust in forgotten drawers. But time would not erase their courage. Decades later, the truth resurfaced. Historians uncovered the incredible cost of the Vosges rescue. The United States Congress reevaluated their service. In 2000, President Bill Clinton presented the Medal of Honor to 22 surviving members of the 442nd. Their unit became the most decorated in U.S. military history, over 18,000 awards for valor, including 21 Medals of Honor and 9,000 Purple Hearts. The Lost Battalion, too, was honored for holding their ground under impossible conditions. Two groups, one trapped, one rescuing, forever bound by a single act of solidarity. Among the recovered documents from the Vosges, a single letter stood out. It was written by a young soldier named Private First Class Robert Bobby Inoue of the 442nd, the night before the final charge. He wrote to his mother, still interned in California, "We're fighting for a country that doesn't trust us. But I still believe in it. Because maybe one day, they'll know what we did here." He never came home. His letter was delivered by hand after the war. Today, in the forests above Bifontaine, France, a small stone monument stands beneath tall, whispering pines. Carved into it are the words, "To the men of the 36th and the 442nd, brothers in arms." Every year, descendants from Texas and Hawaii gather there. Some lay flowers, some salute quietly, and others simply stand in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees, the same wind that once carried the sound of gunfire and courage. The Lost Battalion story is not one of defeat. It is the story of endurance, of faith in one another, and of duty beyond recognition. In 6 days of hell, they held fast when surrender seemed the only option. In 1 week of relentless assault, another group of men despised by many in their own homeland, sacrificed everything to save them. Together, they embodied the truth that war reveals the measure of a man, not by his name or his face or where he was born, but by what he stands for when everything falls apart. In the end, no monument can capture the weight of their courage. No medal can repay the debt. What remains are their voices, faint echoes carried through history, reminding us that even in the darkest forest, the human spirit can still burn bright. October 30th, 1944. 275 men refused to surrender. 800 more gave everything to bring them home. Their story is not lost. It lives on, in the whispering pines of the Vosges, and in the hearts of those who still remember. Dedicated to the men of the 141st Infantry Regiment and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, whose courage, sacrifice, and unity redefined what it means to be American.